Good morning. It's Friday and we're back together. I'm Jill
Yes, we are. I'm Deb, and
and we are at
it's
the Friday
Friday
Grief
Grief.
Chat. Yes,
I
and we're
know.
excited to be
And
back.
yeah, we haven't seen each other for a little bit.
Mm-mm.
No, I guess not. Um, First, I want to give a shout out here in the Midwest. We had some god awful storms
We
last
did.
night. Again, like really high, like 75-mile-an-hour winds, things like that. And a lot of people around here in the small towns, there's been no casualties, fatalities, except of trees and down power lines. Our power went off for a little bit. And for a change, we only lost a couple limbs, one from big one from our apple tree and another one from one of our other bigger trees. But woohoo! I sent Jill pictures yesterday of the cleanup this week from 2 storms ago.
It was
I know.
incredible.
It was. So I just want to give a shout out of it's hard. It's hard to see your down trees. One caused roof damage of one of my friends, another one, a car was on, I mean, the tree was on their car. So for all my friends and people I don't know, I'm thinking of you. I'm just sending good juju and motivation for cleanup
Same to
and
those in South
insurance.
Florida because they're flooding right now. And all
Yeah,
the
they really
places because natural disasters just don't stop.
I don't know if it's the news or what, but it seems like it's happening more and more.
Yeah.
Could be because we're more plugged in. I don't know. Climate change has a lot to do with it. And that's what
I'm
we're seeing,
teaching it.
folks.
I'm teaching as an adjunct for Marian University in a thanatology class for July and August, and it is entirely focused on the grief of first responders. And I have one entire session on disaster teams because those
Mhm.
folks face a lot. So I'm glad everyone is that nobody died last night and no in your area and but it is hard to see all the greenery on the ground, isn't it?
It it's hard to see destruction. One
Hmm.
woman wrote on Facebook that she crawled out through a basement window because the house was leveled when there was a tornado in Plainfield, Illinois. And so this literally stirred up, blew into her life. You feel just like the metaphor. This, she felt leveled.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing some metaphors are just, some pictures are so perfect to define a loss or what's going on in a loss. Literally a couple weeks ago, as my family was in the throes of loss, um, some dishes that were in the car rattled unexpectedly, and one of us just jumped, right? Because
Hmm.
literally we were rattled,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. Metaphors can say it all. Um, I know we also want to talk about briefly all about Father's Day. And Father's Day can be a hard time, especially it's one of the first Father's Days without your dad.
Hmm.
It and it doesn't matter how old you are. A death is a death is a death. Doesn't matter if you're 75 or if you're 35 or if you're 15. And so for those that want nothing to do with fathers because it brings up a memory, for those that fathers, this will be your last time with them, or that this is your first time without them, you know, give yourself the grace to be in that space of, I'm going to take a deep breath. I don't like any of this. I'm going to avoid Facebook, and I am just going to watch a movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let yourself feel what you need to feel, regardless of
Do the
what
thing
anybody
to take
else
care
says.
of you this weekend, right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
about the fathers that are estranged from their kids.
Or
You
kids
know,
who
this
didn't
is,
have fathers, or fathers whose children are not here. It's just like Mother's Day, and
yeah,
I think we don't give enough energy because there's still that thing where men are expected to buck up and not have all the emotions, and men should be allowed to have the same level of emotion and need as women in Mother's Day.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I totally agree. So
Yeah.
what else is going on, Miss Jill?
We're in summer here, and it's good to be back home. I was in Washington State last week with my auntie and uncle and taking care of some things up there. So it's kind of feet back on the ground and get
Uh-huh.
moving. And we've had our newest COVID shots. So I'm sort of crawling out of that because you know how COVID shots can be sometimes, right? They wanted to do shingles at the same time. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm
No,
not that stupid.
no,
No,
no.
that'll be
I
another few months out.
Yeah, yeah. And shingles has its own whatever.
Hmm.
At the beginning of COVID, I had gotten, before we got COVID shots, a month before, 2 months before, I had started my shingles. So we got COVID shots in 21, right?
Hmm.
So in 2020, I think I had started my shingles vaccine. And I'm glad I got my shingles vaccine.
I'm going to get mine, and I hope everybody that's watching this is taking care of yourselves and getting all the things your doctors are recommending because we
Hmm.
got lots of stuff to combat. But
Yeah,
part of what we were going to talk about today was actually related to healthcare, which
yeah.
is therapy related to grief and loss and coping and all the different kinds of therapies that are available. And Deb has put together a marvelous list for today about all the different kinds of therapies. And then um, toward the end, I'm going to chime in about the newest ways that insurance companies are trying to influence how we do therapy and how
Hmm.
long we do therapy, and to make you aware of what's happening on that side of the planet. Because as a therapy practice owner, we see a whole different side of this.
You do. And
Hmm.
I, of course, am not a therapist, but I am a coach and I
Yes, you
do
are.
grief coaching.
Hmm.
And the great thing about being a grief coach is, well, I don't take insurance. It's
Hmm.
not recognized or whatever, but I do work on a payment plan. So that's number one. Number two, the other great thing is I can take ideas and premises from different therapies. And I can do that because I'm not saying I'm doing that therapy. I do a conglomeration and have sort of built my own
Hybrid.
hybrid 6 week routine. And if you need more after 6 weeks, we keep going. But usually 6 weeks gets you discovers your own strengths so that
Hmm.
you can be independent from me, which is what I want, right? So, Jill, I'm gonna start talking about uh, the different therapies.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a therapist, and it was interesting as I go through this. I'm like, oh, so we blend this, and many therapists are usually blending, making
Right.
their own
Mhm.
hybrid, because one sentence does not fit all therapies.
Right.
So the therapist, you need it, and when picking a therapist, you need someone who is flexible and who can do, if you ask them what therapies do you employ, they can answer, like at least give 3 examples of what they do and how it is. The last thing I tell anybody, a really good therapist gives homework. A
Yes,
great
they do.
therapist will give it without you asking. But if you're not getting homework, you need to ask the therapist, I need homework. And if they say, well, I have no homework, do you have homework next time? I guess I will, would be the correct answer, but I can't guarantee it. So I'm going to go through some of these therapies. Okay. This
Hmm.
one isn't necessarily a therapy, but some people do really well going to a support group. And if you have a really good facilitator, they give you a chance to tell your story. They don't work on fixing, but they say to others, maybe, huh, what are 3 things that helped you? So, just an idea of what is going on. You know what I mean? Like they might ask other people in the support group, what's 3 things? Let's write them down. What are 3 things that have worked for all of you? And you find the commonality and you can offer that if it's appropriate, because really support groups are just for talking,
And the
right?
other thing is, you really, when you're doing support groups, you need to make sure that that facilitator is able to include everyone,
Mm-hmm.
keep those who tend to want to monopolize time contained, not shut them down, but contained, so everyone is heard, acknowledged, participating.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to make sure it's one that fits your personality style, and particularly to check to see whether it's faith based or not, because some of them that are faith based don't advertise as such. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes folks don't fit in those kinds of things. And if you've got a specific kind of loss and you have a need to have a group to meet that specific loss, then going to a general group where there's all the losses might not be what you need.
You know, I think in support groups, you have to trust your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel blamed or shamed by anyone in there, trust that you are and don't go back. I just want to say that in general. Trust that you are. In fact, a friend who was going through breast cancer, she called me up. She goes, do people ever fire their doctor? And I said, oh, yes,
All the time.
all the time. And she goes, because this one I felt, and she named how she felt. And I said, get another doctor. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to go back. So I just want to put that out there as Jill does. Support groups are great. However, so use your intuition, use your own smarts, and maybe a support group isn't for you. I want to talk about art therapy. And while some therapists have become art therapists, what art therapy does, because you can do art for your own support, and many people do, what it's about is processing your feelings without using words. But you can draw your way through something. You can use words on the paper. You can draw a picture that shows how you feel. You don't even have to have anything recognizable. I mean, I did a piece of artwork where I must have, I took a magic marker and I must have sworn, written out just swear words or incomplete sentences. And I put it all over the canvas, and rubbing alcohol, 90%, actually, you can blend the colors then. So the words are not recognizable. So you can, and I didn't have somebody do that with me. I did that with myself. Art therapy is another type of therapy that some therapists use. There's something, and Jill, I think you'll be able to explain this better. Motivational interview.
Motivational interviewing is used a lot of the time in substance abuse, and it's a kind of it's more interventionist than just listening and reframing and helping to hear what's behind the messages that you have in your head. It's where did this all come from, and how do we help you find your way to where you need to go? And it's very focused.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something I use much of in grief unless there's substance abuse intertwined around it,
Right.
or there is a history of substance abuse with the person who died, and we're trying to untangle how that relationship worked.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a typical grief approach. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
to me.
And it takes a lot of skill building to do it properly. A therapist who uses it and is not trained in it ought not be touching.
Yeah.
It's like doing psychodynamic therapy. When you're not psychodynamic, you leave Freud outside the door if you
Yeah.
don't do Freud. That's not yours.
Right. Right. Here's another one that works, I think, really well with grief, especially compound griefs and griefs that you've had. Let's say a sibling died maybe when you were 4, and then when you were 12 or 15, a grandmother died, and then, someone else died. This is called somatic therapy, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to be trained in it. My yoga teacher is trained in somatic yoga. And why we say somatic, it has to do with how the body, the physical sensations in your body can lead the way of healing. And so, along with, in at least in somatic yoga that she's been trained in, she works on specific parts of the body, and then she gives us affirmations. Affirmation is a positive way of reframing something.
Mm-hmm.
If we're working on the legs, I walk forward with courage, you know, something like that. So if it's in your arms, she might talk about forgiveness. But the aches and pains in your body while working with certain exercises can very well tell the therapist or the yoga instructor, you might start crying out of release and you don't know why. It's sort of like massage, really. When there's massage therapists, when they get to that one little point,
And it just lets everything go.
it does, just like
Mm-hmm.
cranial sacral. Oh
Right.
my gosh.
Right.
So,
There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk that talks a lot about how our bodies store the emotions, and how and what the point is of releasing them. Somatic therapy is amazing in grief because it lets you identify emotions through physical
Mm-hmm.
feelings, which can sometimes be easier for folks who are really shut down emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
If you're someone who looks at one of those charts of emotions and they're really cool words, but they don't mean anything to you,
Right. Right.
but you can say my stomach hurts or my head just pounds, and then we can work backward from there. It works really well. It also works really well with anxiety.
Yeah.
um, it helps anyone who's anxious understand where that first moment is that anxiety hits your body so that you can then stop it. It's like
Yeah.
putting a cork in it.
And you can continue working on that one part of your body,
Mm-hmm.
and that's important.
Oh,
So
huge.
so that you can, just like you'll see, I often with grief and shame and blame, right here, you all can see me rubbing right here on a tender spot on my sternum. And what have I said before? I'm okay. I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay. And that particular body part with the pressure helps you feel more contained.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another therapy. There's narrative therapy,
Oh,
right?
love that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's where you and your therapist, you start relating a story of what happened, and then logotherapy is sort of a part of this, where you give meaning to your story, and you get to find out uh, the process in which you can use that when you're not with your therapist. What stories are you telling yourself, right? And can you
Mm-hmm.
change that story?
And that's the important part about narrative therapy is being able to go back and remember what your story was when you started, and then you work through the story and the stuff behind it and what you've discovered and what you've released and what things you've challenged, and your story changes.
Exactly.
And that's
Exactly.
the part that's also hard about doing grief work. If you're working with one person but there's lots of families swirling around them, because the
Mhm.
family story is still locked into the family narrative, but
Right.
the person you're working with has rediscovered where the narrative wasn't real. It was surrounded by the things the family needed to keep that structure built around the family's official storyline.
The official storyline. Exactly. You get to
Mhm.
really, if if everybody is telling a story, what story do you get to tell yourself? You don't have
Mhm.
to like the family story. You don't have to agree with that. And that's what's hard,
A-
because the family narrative tells you you must believe this way.
And
But
the family narrative sets up how you're supposed to respond to grief,
that's right.
and what you're supposed to share and how much sharing is allowed. And the example that I have of that, which is a powerful one that I wasn't even part of, is when my great grandfather died in a horrible accident. My grandfather wasn't told the truth. My dad wasn't told the truth. And fortunately, on my dad's side, it became we need to be able to share emotions and feelings, as opposed to the family that he came from up north,
Hmm.
where everything had to be locked down because the story was constructed to protect the littles. And
That's
so the big kids and
exactly.
little kids had two different losses.
A lot of times surrounding a suicide loss,
Mm-hmm.
when there's littles, the
Mm-hmm.
adults who are not very psychologically aware,
Mm-hmm.
they want to either just flat out lie, or they want to construct a story in the lie. You know what I mean? Like there's more
Mm-hmm.
to the story. And here's what happens with that particular kind of lie. Eventually, Someone wants to do
Someone tells.
policy, right?
Yep.
And
Right.
there's a death certificate. And what happens?
Or there's genealogy,
That's
and
what I'm
someone
saying.
does a DNA test.
Yeah.
And then there's whole groups now for those who've experienced loss of their reality of their identity because someone did a DNA test, and oh my goodness, now everything, even though nothing has changed because I'm still part of this family, everything's changed because I'm only genetically halfway part of this family. I belong to someone else,
Uh-huh.
right? And
Absolutely.
it's a huge loss, and
Huge.
narrative is a big part of that.
Right. Because narrative, we're saying the nice word.
Mm-hmm.
They lied to you.
Yes, they
Let's
did.
just say that. The lie was constructed, and now you're like, what? What?
Right?
That's not my real dad. Why didn't you? And then a whole bunch of stuff comes up, and you'll need therapy afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Let me continue. I really like this. Humanistic therapy. It's
Mm.
it emphasizes a person's what they're about for self-awareness and personal growth. It's like you sort of, some therapists, they don't really uh, they're not comfortable talking about religious things or spiritual things. However, that is also who you are. And so when you're with a particular therapist that can look at you as a human being on earth, and you need a particular faith to help you move through, they don't take that away, but they treat you as a human being, as a total being, not just one part.
Mm-hmm.
So, because they have that flexibility. Go ahead.
No, it's one of my favorite things to do. I love using that approach. It's um, that and family systems together make up almost 60% of what I do because that's how you understand, and that's how you take someone through understanding, and that's how they decide how they're going to construct their life in their future as they need it to be for the person they are, as opposed to the person other people expect them to be.
Right, right.
Hmm.
A few more, and then I know we're almost at the end, but I think these are important enough to
They
run.
are important.
There is something called CBT, which is cognitive behavioral
Behavioral
therapy.
therapy.
Go ahead.
It
You can
is the
throw
standard.
DBT.
It is the
Yeah.
gold standard. It is what everybody is trained to do. And that's because it works. It
Yes.
is, what is the story in my head? What are the messages I hear? What are the message I give myself?
Mhm.
And how much of that is real and how much of it is my negative self-talk or somebody else's negative self-talk that's been programmed into my head, or now with our littles, the negative self-talk from social media, and what has TikTok done to damage my brain about what I'm supposed to look like, act like, sound like, be like. That's where CBT can be powerful with the little peoples, right? We need to figure out what we're telling ourselves so we can tell ourselves differently, so we can hear those messages, so we can respond differently, because we respond to people based on the filter that comes from the messages we hear. Was that too
So
convoluted?
no, I'll just say one thing. I think this example, I think a lot of therapists use it. It
Mm-hmm.
goes like this. Is there really a lion snarling behind that door, or is it a little kitten? And you don't
Mm-hmm.
know till you open up the door. So,
Mm-hmm.
which is it? Is there really a lion snarling behind that door? And so, you know, it it plants in a doubt, but not a doubt, a little light that
Mm-hmm.
just maybe it it feels really big, but maybe when you look at it, it might be really small. So you have to take the leap, and it's cognitive. So this all goes on in your mind, as opposed to what is dialectical behavior therapy, DBT.
Oh my goodness. That one is one that's used frequently for folks who have been diagnosed with more serious mental health issues,
Mhm.
particularly borderline personality disorder. It can be used with a variety of other issues. It requires homework, and it is taking apart the messages and seeing how we respond to the message, and how do you determine what message that you are hearing versus what's the message that's actually intended, and how
Mhm.
do you learn new responses to it, along with rating scales so that you can manage your responses. It is a very time intensive approach. It's used a
It
lot as
is.
well in inpatient units.
Thank you. Here's one that has been coming up more frequently, although I personally had it like, I'm going to say close to 20 years ago, maybe, or certainly 15, and it's called EMDR. And that works well with grief, especially when there has been um, more than just 95-year-old grandpa died. When there's more like you were in a car accident, or you found the person dead, right? Or there's been, am I saying that right? When there's more trauma.
It is trauma focused, and it's based on neuropsychiatry, and it is effective for many people. It is not like all therapies. That's the problem with EMDR. It's not one size fits all.
Correct.
Folks who are um, unable to follow the preparation required to do it will not benefit from it. Folks who are looking for a therapist to just listen to them and help them figure things out, as opposed to stamp out the impact of trauma, it's not going to be effective. It's
Right.
eye movement desensitization response, and it's designed to take the neural pathway that trauma is linked to in your brain and block it, so that if there's another trauma, it doesn't grab that trauma path and take you back to all the old traumas. It
Mm.
gives you skills to deal with it, but to also block it. Debbie's right. EMDR has been very helpful to address the trauma parts of grief, to reduce the emotional reactivity. It is fabulous for many people. It's used
Yeah.
by the VA now. It should be used more by the VA.
Right.
It's used by a lot of folks. I
Hmm.
personally can't provide it because I have a brain injury, and it requires being able to use either light or movement, and that will make me fall over, and that makes clients worry. So it's not my skill set. Deb is extremely skilled in it. Deb Frankel. Oh my gosh.
That's great.
Going to
That's
another
great.
thing for next week. But
Yeah.
if you have trauma in your past, or trauma related to a loss, if it's that
Yes.
dying process or the not having been present for the COVID death, you would do well with an EMDR trained grief therapist.
Yes. The
Mm.
best. And one last thing, and there's many more therapies, but I wanted to talk about activities of rituals.
Yes.
Rituals that connect you either to your specific type of spiritual attractions, or how you want to be spiritually, or even religiously. Religiously would be more a ritual, like in Judaism, is there are certain times of the year you light a candle, a special candle, you light a yard site candle, you might light Sabbath candles, you might light other things. That's a type of ritual to honor the deceased. And Terry, she's a chaplain. Terry
Daniel.
Daniels has is so well versed in different types of rituals. Another one is where you can write out your losses on maybe a piece of fabric and
Mm-hmm.
tie that loss, now that you let it go into the fabric, on a ribbon or string, and you could throw it over a tree and let
Mm-hmm.
the elements sort of absorb that loss. You know, the wind, uh, when things start getting like a little ragged after a while from being out there a year or so, it just, it's a gentle process, and you can attach and see that the elements of the earth are affecting the loss that you tied to that string. So it's like a full body experience.
I love that. There's also the ones where you tie the knots in the rope when there's a event related to the loss or the person. And personally, I just connected with someone who was, instead of making quilts, which is
Yes.
another ritual, they take the bits after the quilt, the leftover bits that we normally throw away from making memory blankets, memory pillows, and they put them out where birds gather with the bird seed. And the birds take their loved ones' clothing bits and weave them into their nests.
Yes, that's
And
beautiful.
talk about a rebirth. And sometimes you can see bits of that around your yard or the neighborhood as they fly off with them.
Do you know, another different kind of ritual is, it's a a ritual is a physical body experience, something you might be able to hear, see, taste, and touch. It comes through your senses, such as honoring someone making their favorite food, and you eat it. And that's why I say it's a smell and a taste. But another thing that people do is they make a special pillow from the person who's died, makes a pillow out of that clothing.
Mm-hmm.
So it repurposes it. And yet, if you need to sleep with that pillow, if you need to hold that pillow, you're symbolically holding that person in their clothes.
Right.
This is just one example of a ritual, because ritual involves all those things. So,
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad we did this today. I think we'll hold on the part I was going to do because we're over, but
yeah.
I think this was really powerful. And what I hope people get from this is there are lots of different ways that you can approach grief and loss with a therapist or a grief coach or in a group or on
Mhm,
your own. And you can
mhm,
find books about all of these. If you're more of a biblio self therapist, you want to just do the reading and take care of it and take care of yourself and then give yourself permission to ask for help if you need it later. But
mhm.
there are lots of different ways. And I do also want to throw in garden therapy because that's a Debbie Jenkins
Yes.
Frankel thing all over the place.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I've got a massive garden this year. So that's what I'm engaging in too. My tomato plants are 6 feet tall now. Yeah, love it because we don't have your storms, so we don't have
Right.
things being destroyed.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got lots of different ways that people can help and find help and do their own help, but we don't want anyone who listens to the grief chat to hold it all in and just hang on to it. We want you to release it in a way that works for you, and we want you to be able to find some joy and some laughter while you're doing it.
Yes. Well, thanks again, Jill. This was good. I can't wait to post it on my page. You'll post it on yours. And
Absolutely.
if you
And we
have
have a
any other questions, let me just say you can
yeah,
write us,
hmm
and one of us will answer.
absolutely. And we have a researcher who is doing her PhD right now who wants to join us on the show in another couple weeks. I'm going to post her stuff this weekend. And she's looking for people to participate in her research. Her Human Subject Research Committee has approved it, and she's had trouble finding people to participate. So we're going to reach out to our listeners, viewers, and the people who view and listen to share it with others to see if we can't help her get her research completed. So thanks to everyone. Have a good weekend. For those of you who are experiencing Father's Day not in a great way, we wish you all the best. For those of you who are experiencing it in a good way, we hope it's a good weekend. And for those of you in storms, stay in and stay covered. Right?
Stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.